filming a documentary or documenting history through photographs is incredible work. But how can we really take steps to elevate our work and transform it into a campaign or a movement that creates lasting change that you can track? So when talking about art activism and film work, it's also very critical to understand that we in the Western world have a problem exploiting people of color and immigrants and using their imagery for views, for trauma clickbaiting, and as aesthetics. But their condition is not an aesthetic. They are not just a trailer scene, an exciting, thrilling scene for your documentary. They're actual people, and they live complex, nuanced lives, and they have allowed you to be part of their journey. So we need to make sure that we're centering care for these communities and really think about how centering care can actually be a form of, micro-activism in and of itself. So a lot of that to me comes from this basic concept of subject versus human. The communities that you're filming, that you're intruding upon, again, they have lives of their own and they're kind enough to let you be part of them. So I want to challenge you guys. Are you just visitors in their lives, or are you doing the work with these communities to actually, help them and give them resources and connect them to other opportunities? Like, what are you actually doing on a day-to-day basis with these communities? And, are you working with them in a collaborative sense? For example, are you dropping the camera if something happens to them, or are you gonna continue filming for that award-winning scene? So, that care and that effort to me is a lot of what art activism really is. But focusing on film and photography for a bit, what kind of relationship do you want to have with the community that you're working with? And let's consider how, collaborating can be activism. So I also love thinking about consent and how consent is continuous, and thinking beyond that contract that's signed that says that their image and their likeness can be used in whatever way that you please. Think about, I often say that if someone were to come up to me and say, I don't want this scene in your documentary, it puts me at risk, it puts my safety at risk, or I just don't align with it. No matter how much I like that scene, I'm gonna hit the delete button, because that is what it means to be a true and thoughtful art activist. So, and that to me is the point of art activism, is prioritizing that activist bit, and thinking about the communities that you're serving with your films. But I could talk about this for a long time, the soul of art activism, but I'm gonna shift my gear into my first example where we really think about the relationships that you have to the communities. So I'm filming a feature documentary. It's titled Afghans of Boston. I started filming with the Afghan community in 2021 when the United States withdrew from Afghanistan. And while I was preparing to film, I reached out to countless people who were already doing the work, and I just truly listened to them. And I was connected to this wonderful group of Afghan activists, and I got to work with the Global Movement for Peace in Afghanistan Union. And together with that union, we came up with this unified and solid and well-researched call to action that was clear and that was powerful. And so we not only created this documentary, but we also ended up, rallying people in person to protest, to remind the government that we're here and that we're not backing down. So the film itself, of course, is super powerful. It follows the stories of refugees that are both previously settled and just came into the United States after the issues in Afghanistan started happening in 2021. But what's more important is the work that I'm doing on a literal daily basis with this community. So including supporting these refugees, organizing protests in Boston, writing letters to the government, and asking officials for funding and resources, and so much more. But I also actually, you can go to the next slide. I organized this seminar at Tufts University, and it's called Let Afghan Girls Learn. And we educated not only the public, but also law students about the state of education in Afghanistan and ways that they could uplift women-led organizations that are doing the work there. And so we featured 2 women speakers who are literally secretly educating women in Afghanistan right now via smuggled iPads. So they load up these iPads with coursework and videos and educational instruction that lasts these women years. So that to me is making a real change. And to me, doing this seminar is beyond what a filmmaker does. So like a regular filmmaker would probably let someone else organize it and then come and film it. So this is not the work that a regular filmmaker does. This is something more, and to me that is the art activism piece. And I think that art activism is something that leads to the betterment of the community that you're working with, and all that while you're also getting evidence via filmmaking. And the filmmaking, the footage that you're getting, is something that you can use as leverage to get a response from officials. So speaking of leveraging footage as evidence, you can go to the next slide, please. I was 20 years old when I started filming this feature documentary, I Stand with Jessie, and it was about a low-income immigrant sick woman from Texas, and she had severe delays in her cancer treatment just because of health insurance. And my goal was to lower the age of breast cancer screenings for low-income patients from 40 to 35. And I wanted to reach out to the government, but I really didn't know how. I was 20 years old, so this was, pre-woke internet era, so social media was not helpful quite yet. So, how did I do this at the age of 20? Have any of y'all heard of Google? I literally Googled it. I Googled women in the government who had ties to breast cancer, and Google told me a whole bunch of awesome information. So I reached out to them, and I asked them to set up campaigns with us and petitions and have their support. And this just goes to say that I think that sometimes we make things very complex when literally the answer is right there. In my case, Google really came through. But from this experience, I honestly learned the immeasurable power of audience outreach and the power of Google and the power of knowing who to contact and how to turn a film into a campaign and how to target your requests to the right people. And it's such a simple thing that you can walk out of this room and apply this to absolutely any project that you're working on. And so again, in this way, the art is a piece of evidence that says, hey, I'm going to stay in this world forever, so help us now, because this is proof that we demanded action and that we demanded change. And so, this work is imperative in many ways and more impactful than a film alone. And it's necessary because very sadly, Jessie, who this movie is about, she passed away, and it was a very long and tough battle for her with breast cancer. And again, it was all just because of this delay in receiving care. And she was an incredible soul, and this is exactly what fuels me to drop the camera and do real work with these real people. And films and photography are a pretty clear way of thinking about activism, but I just want to kind of get a little bit abstract. Thank you, my friend. So let's think about how fine art can also be unique and effective ways of art activism. For example, the Guerrilla Girls were wonderful activists, and they spoke up for women's rights, and they did so through the power of their art. For me, it all began with this piece called Udasi, and I created this short video that went viral, so I'm just gonna let the video do the talking.
I'm a Sikh artist, and recently my work was exhibited at a gallery. This is my hanging sculpture piece titled Udasi. Udasi has a dual meaning in Punjabi and in Sikhi. Udasi not only means journey, but it also literally translates to the word sadness. This piece features my father's Sikh turban called Bag. I wrote different racist encounters on each layer that I personally experienced in America post 9/11. Attached to the bag is my mother's chunni or scarf, which contains photos best depicting my family's journey to and in America. The Pag and Chuni intersect to create a genderless entity which honors the concept of gender equality and genderless spirits that Sikhi teaches. A robe holds up the hanging sculpture from the Pag, depicting how my mother is a survivor of the 1984 Sikh genocide, in which Hindu nationalist mobs went door to door, hunting for and slaughtering Sikh families. I wanted to honor my mom's trauma that she witnessed and barely survived, while maintaining the regality of the Pag and the resilience of Sikhs. Within these fabrics, archival photographs, and written memories of our struggle lies our Udasi.
Thank you. So because of its virality,
I'm a Sikh artist.
Sorry, that's okay. I'm sure everybody would love to see it again, but not really because of time. But yeah, because of its virality, I'm actually going to be curating an entire exhibit now in Rochester, New York, featuring all Sikh artists and specifically Sikh queer artists. And it's starting July 8th. It's called Parda Fash. But you know, what's interesting is I had to really shift the way that I was talking about this subject, because this exhibit was supposed to be on the topic of 1984, which was the Sikh genocide, where in Delhi, Sikh families and children and women were just brutally slaughtered in Delhi, but also across India as well. And this subject is actually banned from being spoken about in India. And it's missing from recent history and textbooks and laws. So, you know, if you didn't already know, India has a very long-standing, issue of oppressing and silencing ethnic and religious minority groups, and it's still doing that today. So, in fact, filmmakers and journalists and authors who talk about this subject are at risk of being arrested or blacklisted when they speak about 1984. So I knew I couldn't endanger myself or my fellow artists by talking about it openly. So, you know, what did we do instead? We layered our message through color and fabrics and subjectivity. And, you know, when you make a piece of fine art to deliver a message, each little thing about the piece holds a lot of value, and it delivers that message from the types of materials that you choose and where you source them from, to the type of colors and their symbols, and to what other pieces are being exhibited alongside it and the history of those artists that are in your exhibit with you. So, you know, in many ways, this piece is doing a lot more than what a film could. Because, you know, if I made a film about 1984 and my family's personal experience with it, I would be blacklisted. My family back in Punjab would be questioned. So, you know, in many ways, this art is actually allowing me to say more. It's giving me security and a cover, and allowing me to express the same story without having to speak a word of my own. So also think about the physical agency of a piece of art versus digital scrolling and resharing. Because these pieces, they exist in real life, and they quite literally take up space. And so they remind us that they need to be addressed and understood. And so, you know, fine art is a way to speak to each other beyond language, beyond politics, beyond gender, beyond identity. And it's something that you have to experience and interact with physically, and that message comes across to your soul. So as we think about these other forms of approachable art, especially when talking about subjects that might put us at risk, you know, really think about how art softens the blow without being weak. It just redirects the message into something that people can kind of feel for themselves. And this route actually allows us to connect to a lot of people who don't traditionally look at fact-based media. But I've been talking for a long time, and I'm really glad that I got to share my experiences and some radical thoughts. But, you know, I could go on for a long time about how we can really elevate and really shift our perspective and create movements out of our artworks. But I would love to hear some amazing thoughts from my lovely co-presenter, who has had an incredible career and long-lasting movements come from her work.
Thank you so much, Ravjot. Isn't she amazing?
Oh,
it's been such an honor, getting to know you, during the course of this, and learning from your amazing heart and passion for art and activism. So thank you everyone, for your long attention. I'll try to be, quick. So, Ravjot already shared about art and activism with her amazing examples, but I just wanted to kind of step back a bit and go back to like the basic definitions. So, how do we define art? So, also because, it's always interesting, who thinks of themselves as an artist and who doesn't, right? So here's one definition from Webster, which is quite a simple one. It says, a skill acquired by experience, study, or observation. For example, the art of making friends. Son? Yeah. I really love this because, it opens up a whole universe of opportunities. And then the second one is by Stanford University, which even questions whether art can, really be defined. So, for the purpose for today's workshop, we're going to have a little, breakout sessions later on. So, let's feel free to define our art more broadly. For example, something as simple as, the art of being able to have fun. So isn't that such a necessary thing, I think, in the world right now, because everything is about being productive and doing more and all of this, and we forget to have fun. If, for example, if somebody is really struggling, to have fun, then, whatever it is that, you feel coming to your mind that's unique to you, if you want to take a moment and just write it down, what is your art? And we're going to, work through that together a little bit later after the presentation. So next slide. So moving on to, what is activism? So again, the Webster Dictionary defines it as a doctrine or practice that emphasizes direct, vigorous action, especially in support of or opposition to one side of a controversial issue. So what then is action? It is the accomplishment of a thing, usually over a period of time in stages, over the possibility of repetition. And it could also be behaviors or conduct or an initiative or an enterprise. So taking the earlier example, so if you are a person who has the ability to have fun, then even the simple act of you behaving or bringing the fun to the party is activism, right? So maybe we can start with the gala tonight, bring a little fun. So, every time, we're impacting even one more person, in our environment, that itself is activism. And that's what, Ravjot referred to earlier as micro-activism. And this can be scaled up, to a larger scale. So, an art can remain an art for our own selves if we don't share it, right? And that's fine too. You may not want to share it, but then, what is this differentiating factor that, some of us use that makes art into activism? And, really thinking more deeply about this, I thought about it, and it's really our humanity. It's our intention. Like, why are we making this art? Or, what is this quality that we have, we consider an art, right? So let's watch a clip from a masterclass with jazz musician Herbie Hancock. And he's talking about an encounter he had with his musical mentor, Miles Davis.
Sorry, just 1 second.
In the middle of one of the songs, during Miles' solo, I played this chord that was so wrong. I thought I had just destroyed everything and reduced that great night to rubble. Miles took a breath and he played some notes and he made my chord right. And I could not figure out how he did that. It sounded like magic, It took me years to figure out what actually happened. Here's what happened. I judged what I had played. Miles didn't. Miles just accepted it as something new that happened. And he did what any jazz musician should always try to do, and that is try to make anything that happens into something of value.
So isn't that beautiful? I really like that, right? So
Helen Hansel was able to win any competition she took part in. She was known as
yeah, so thank you, Ashika, multitasking. So what do we do without her? Let's give her all her incredible support, the behind the scenes. So maybe you're wondering, what has this clip to do with activism, right? But I've shown it to, highlight a very important point, and that is intention. So when Miles Davis heard, the wrong note, as Herbie said, he did what any jazz musician would do and create something of value, right? That's jazz, right? But then, what is that quality, that makes a person do that? So it's not just a skill, right? Not a skill of being a musician, but that allowed him to respond in that moment. But it's really something deeper. It's his humanity's ability to be non-judgmental and receptive to what is happening. So I think, art activism, all these are terms, right? But it comes back to humanity, that, what is driving us? And, that's what we need to really tap into. So because, any form of activism involves, it's a long road, it's a long journey. And it requires us to keep going back, to this purpose, like why are we doing this? So to illustrate this more, I just wanted to share, can you show the next slide, my own journey. I grew up in Mumbai, India, with a very loving family, and also we were an extended family. You can see like a whole bunch of us. Of course, my birthday, some friends were visiting. But so a big turning point in my life was, when my grandaunt died. You can see her in the picture, the white sari on the left, on the right hand side of this picture. So she got married very young at 13, and then she's widowed at 16. And I remember the visual, the night before she died, because I was very close to her. I used to hang out with her all the time. She just had this empty look in her eyes, and I felt like her life was a waste, in a sense that she never got to really fulfill her own potential. And so that became a turning point where I decided that I'm never going to let that happen to me. And that was my driver throughout my life. So next slide. So then, I relentlessly pursued my career. I went to college and I was modeling and writing for newspapers. Next slide. And then I got that was I did my MBA, and I was writing for newspapers. I was working in an ad agency called J. Walter Thompson, which was one of the most leading ad agencies at the time. And next slide. And then I got married. Which seemed like the crashing of all my dreams, because I came to America on this really restrictive visa where I could not work, I could not earn. I had to be, completely dependent on my husband, which some of you may be familiar is like, when somebody gets an H1 work visa, that's what my husband got, it's an employment visa. The spouse and the kids are allowed to come along, but they get a dependent visa on which you're not allowed to have anything, basically. So I had no idea what I was going to do, but I ended up making a documentary, and I'm just going to show you a short clip. And while Ashika's pulling it up, the next slide. It's a trailer from there. So, I want to show you this. It's not the greatest quality, but that's also another reason why I want to show you, because we don't have to wait, till something is perfect, for it to be able to make a change. So you can show.
Independence. The very first thing I lost when I set foot in the land of the free, and they stamped me as dependent spouse on my passport.
H-4 visa holders are not allowed work authorization, though they are in the country legally. They can neither work for anybody else, nor can they generate their own income through self-employment.
5 years later, I'm still not allowed to work or have any form of income on my H-4 or dependent spouse visa.
I wanted to, start working, and I applied to a few jobs, around, and the first question would be like, what's your status?
You have to not only find a job, you have to find an employer that's willing to sponsor you.
I finally got a call for an interview with a large media company, But the moment I mentioned my visa situation, I was told to leave.
It's easy to get a job, very hard to get sponsorship.
I was dependent on my husband for tiny things like finding a doctor or going from one place to another. Each rejection, each time I called him in the office to ask a stupid question, depleted one more layer of my confidence.
What ownership and accountability should I be taking?
Do you even know what we have in our bank account?
It's not my money.
Oh, let's have another conversation about that.
Abhi, I'd like to finish this conversation.
There becomes that tension where because the wife is not contributing, some of the husbands end up having this feeling of, well, you're not earning, so I have more say in how we spend the money. But in the other dynamic where the husbands are saying, well, what do you think, what should we do? The women themselves are feeling so guilty that they opt out of making financial decisions.
There was so much suffering in this country. But then why do so many people come here? Why were we here?
These are people who are being brought in only in the most base functions of women. Housewives, baby makers, and sex partners.
I didn't know how I could ever get the lost time back. And I didn't even want it. I just wanted to end it all. I just wanted to just die. To no longer feel this guilt, to no longer feel this wastefulness, to no longer feel like a burden. I just wanted to die. The first time I chanted the words, Namyo Horenge Kyo, I had no idea that this was the name of my life itself. For the first time, I started to believe that the whole universe was inside me and that I could make all my dreams come true. I found strength to help other women on this visa by making a film. Only I had never held a camera in my life. I wasn't totally comfortable making a movie about myself. How could I expect these other women to expose their suffering and failures if I couldn't? I was clear that this film had to be made, and what an important role documentary had in the world.
So, at the time, this film, it really broke the silence around the issue. Nobody had been talking about it. This was again pre-Facebook, pre-all of this. And so I was very naive. I thought people will find out about this, especially South Asian community. Everyone will say, let's do something. That was not the case. But I kept reaching out to a lot of the South Asian non-profits as well. But again, everyone was strapped for resources. There were other issues within the community. So I just created my own website. I started my own newsletter and I eventually put up the whole film for free on YouTube. And a lot of women started writing to me. And even within the community, there was a lot of people said that, why are you making such a big deal? You should feel lucky, you get to come here with your husband, just have babies, so many different things and no support. And many times I would just hit rock bottom and I would feel like, I just want to give up. But next slide. At that time, my spiritual practice really helped me. And there is this concept called changing poison into medicine. And what it means is that, anything that, each of us in this room, we have one thing at least, right, that is causing us suffering, and that in traditional sense is known as karma, but it doesn't have to be something that we continue to suffer with, right? And that's the very thing that can become our mission or our purpose in life at whatever scale, right? And so with that intention, I didn't give up, and I uploaded the trailer, and then many women started reaching out to me, and it was like a movement. So next slide. And so it started with a small screening. One woman on this visa, she was a student, she invited me to Brandeis University. We had a screening and a Q&A, and then the university ended up buying the film. A local newspaper, they did a story, and then Here and Now on NPR, it's a very famous show by Robin Young. They called me to interview me. And then from PBS, this show POV, to the contrary, they heard the interview and they called me and they interviewed me. So I had all this ripple effect without having like a press agent or anybody, anybody to do all of that. And then mainstream media picked it up. Like it was in CNN, Washington Post, all these big publications. And then finally, I got invited to DC in 2013 by another South Asian nonprofit called SALT, and we met with community leaders, and I screened my film, and many of them worked in the administration, and they were shocked because they were like, we only get numbers, so we get so much population, there are such and such visa, but when we are dealing with, we don't realize these numbers are people. And seeing your film, we realize these are people, and it gives us more meaning in the work that we do. And during that time, there were a lot of panels and rallies. I got invited again, and we mobilized more women. They started their own advocacy groups and on Facebook and other places. And then the School of Visual Arts screened my film. They used it as a case study, and they created a public service announcement during a very important comment period, and all the comments just went up. And then next slide. Finally, in 2015, President Obama issued an executive order granting work authorization to about 100,000 spouses, and this was unprecedented. We never thought, at least I never thought, making a small video that this would be possible. And next slide. And this April, I was invited to share my immigration story in Portland, Oregon by a nonprofit called The Immigrant Story. And I was able to share it live in front of 600 people in the audience. And that was an incredible feeling, and I felt like, all the years were not like wasted. So next slide. Now I'm continuing this fight because not all dependent spouses are allowed work authorization, and also there are children who risk deportation. And you may have heard from some of them. Actually, there's a parallel panel going on in the other room with talking about that. And it's called Dreams Uprooted, and we are still in production. So please follow us, like us, all that really helps spread awareness. Even one more person watching it. And we're looking for partners at all levels. And so I just want to end with this quote from my spiritual mentor, Daisaku Ikeda. Next slide. He says that there is a saying that speech is silver and silence is golden, but when you're engaged in a struggle, the opposite is true. Then speaking out is golden and silence is defeat. So let's not hesitate, to speak out, because all it takes is one person speaking up. And I really hope that we can carry that message forward. Like even if you forget everything that we said, that let's speak up. Let's encourage others in our environment as well, because we don't know what change we can make. So thank you so much. And now we're going to do a little activity and thinking and planning as an art activist, right? So I think given all that, we can all count ourselves as artists and activists in some form, right? So, so we split into 4 groups, or how many groups should we do?
What do you think? Three?
Three groups? 3 groups of maybe, 5 to 8 people. So we could break out, and then, each person, write one issue. So we have these index cards here, which we'll hand out, and some markers if you need. You could identify one issue, that you may be facing, that, you would like to bring about some change. And just for the sake of, having a good dialogue, and just nominate one person, maybe to lead the group in your group, or you can self-nominate or nominate each other. And then, we'll just create a plan and, really go think creatively of anything, right? A spoken word or photograph, even if you can't do it yourself, because oftentimes what blocks us is we think how am I going to do this myself, right? But an idea, can be shared and worked with on as a team, so you can really feel free, So anything, it can be spoken word, photographs, fashion, song, skit, anything. And then, really thinking about, what are organizations or communities that you would like to connect with, community leaders. And then in the end, we'll have like 1 or 2 people come up from each group and talk about it. So very briefly, so it doesn't have to be like a completely crystallized. This is just the beginning. right? And then you may want to later on stay in touch with each other and take it forward, or you never know what may come of it. In the gala, you may be talking to somebody, because I really believe in the power of manifestation. You put an idea out there, you find you set a thing flowing in the universe, right? You may meet somebody who's worked in that area, and something can be done. Even if you want to be involved, you can pass the idea along. And Ravjot and me are here. We'll share our contact details, and even later on, if you want to follow up and work on those ideas, we're really happy to support. So we have about 20 minutes?
No, it's 15.
15 minutes.
Yeah.
So we have 15 minutes. So we could maybe like one group back there, one group here, and one group here. Yeah, and you feel